and welcome back to English as a Second Language. I'm David, and I'm really glad you're here with me today. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the channel, and if you've been following along with our episodes, thank you so much for being part of this community. Today, we're continuing our career series, and I have to say, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because it's so practical and useful for your real life. We're going to dive into something that I know makes a lot of people feel anxious, job interviews. But specifically, we're going to talk about what to say in a job interview without sounding nervous. Before we jump in, I want to let you know that at the end of today's episode, we'll review some really useful vocabulary that came up during our discussion. So even if you hear a word or phrase that you're not sure about, don't worry, we'll go over it together later. Just last week, I was having coffee with my friend Maria, and she told me something that really stuck with me. She said, David, I know my English is good enough for work, but every time I have a job interview, I freeze up, I forget everything I wanted to say, and I sound so nervous that I don't even recognize my own voice. Does that sound familiar to you? I bet it does. The truth is, even native English speakers get nervous in job interviews, but when you're speaking in your second language, it can feel even more challenging. That's exactly why I wanted to dedicate this entire episode to helping you feel more confident and prepared. And here's what I've learned from helping hundreds of English learners prepare for job interviews. The secret isn't to eliminate nervousness completely. That's probably impossible. The secret is to have a toolkit of phrases and strategies that you can rely on, even when you're feeling anxious. When you know exactly what to say and how to say it, your confidence naturally increases. Let me start by telling you about something that happened to me years ago. I was interviewing candidates for a marketing position at my company, and I'll never forget this one interview. A young man came in, and I could tell he was incredibly nervous. His hands were shaking, his voice was quiet, and he kept apologizing for his English. But then something interesting happened. When I asked him about his previous work experience, he suddenly became animated and confident. He told me a specific story about a project he had worked on, and his whole demeanor changed. He spoke clearly, he made eye contact, and he sounded passionate about his work. That's when I realized something important. Confidence in job interviews often comes from preparation, but it also comes from talking about things you genuinely care about and know well. When you have good stories to tell and you've practiced telling them, you naturally sound more confident. So let's start with the foundation of sounding confident in a job interview: preparation. I know this might sound obvious, but I'm talking about a specific kind of preparation that many people skip. Most people prepare by memorizing answers to common questions, but that's not the most effective approach. Instead, I want you to prepare by collecting stories. What do I mean by stories? I mean specific examples from your work experience, your education, or even your personal life that demonstrate your skills and qualities. These stories should be real, detailed, and relevant to the job you're applying for. When you tell a story, you're not just answering a question, you're showing the interviewer who you are and what you can do. Let me give you an example. Instead of saying, I am a good team player, you could say, last year I worked on a project with 5 other colleagues. We had a tight deadline, and one of our team members got sick for 2 weeks. I offered to take on some of his responsibilities, and I also helped coordinate the extra work among the rest of the team. We ended up finishing the project on time, and our manager was really pleased with the results. Do you see the difference? The story is much more convincing and memorable than just saying you're a good team player. Plus, when you're telling a real story about something you actually experienced, you naturally sound more confident because you're talking about something you know well. Now, let's talk about one of the most important skills for sounding confident in job interviews: speaking at the right pace. When we're nervous, we tend to speak either too fast or too slowly. Speaking too fast makes you sound anxious and can make it harder for the interviewer to understand you. Speaking too slowly can make you sound uncertain or unprepared. The key is to find what I call your confident pace. This is slightly slower than your normal conversational speed, but not so slow that it sounds unnatural. Here's a simple technique you can practice. When you're answering a question, imagine that you're explaining something important to a good friend. You want them to understand you clearly, so you speak deliberately and clearly, but you're not rushing because you're comfortable with them. Another thing that can help you sound more confident is using what I call bridge phrases. These are short expressions that give you a moment to think while you're speaking. They're completely natural in English conversation, and they can prevent you from saying or too much. Some examples include, "That's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. In my experience," or "I'm glad you asked about that." These phrases serve two purposes. First, they buy you a few seconds to organize your thoughts. Second, they make you sound thoughtful and professional. Even native speakers use these kinds of phrases in job interviews, so don't worry about using them. They're perfectly appropriate. Let me share another story with you. I once coached a student named Carlos who was preparing for job interviews in the tech industry. Carlos had excellent technical skills and good English, but he was struggling with confidence. Every time he practiced answering interview questions, he would start strong, but then trail off and apologize for his English. We worked on several strategies together. First, we identified his strongest experiences and turned them into clear, structured stories. Then we practiced what I call confident endings, ways to conclude your answers that reinforce your main points. Instead of ending with, "I think that's all," or "Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question," Carlos learned to end with statements like, "That experience taught me the importance of clear communication in team projects," or "I believe this background makes me well suited for this position." The difference was remarkable. When Carlos started ending his answers confidently, his entire presence changed. He sat up straighter, spoke more clearly, and stopped apologizing for his English. He got the job, by the way, and he later told me that learning to end his answers strongly was one of the most valuable skills he developed. Now, let's talk about one of the trickiest parts of job interviews: answering difficult questions without sounding defensive or uncertain. You know the questions I'm talking about. What's your biggest weakness? Why did you leave your last job? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? These questions can make anyone feel nervous, but they're actually opportunities to show your self-awareness and professionalism. The key to answering difficult questions confidently is to have a strategy. For weakness questions, don't try to disguise a strength as a weakness. That sounds fake. Instead, choose a real area where you've been working to improve and focus on what you've learned and how you've grown. For example, I used to have difficulty with public speaking, but I've been taking steps to improve. I joined a local speaking club and I volunteer to give presentations at work. I've noticed that my confidence has increased significantly, and I actually enjoy speaking in front of groups now. For questions about leaving previous jobs, stay positive and focus on what you're looking for in your next role, not what you disliked about your previous one. And for questions about your future goals, show that you're ambitious but also realistic and connect your goals to the company and position you're applying for. Here's something else that can help you sound more confident: asking thoughtful questions. Many people think that the goal of a job interview is just to answer questions well, but asking good questions shows that you're engaged, serious about the role, and thinking strategically about your career. It also gives you a chance to take control of the conversation and show your knowledge and interest. Good questions to ask include, what does success look like in this role? What are the biggest challenges facing the team right now? How would you describe the company culture? What opportunities are there for professional development? These questions show that you're thinking about how you can contribute to the company and grow in your career. Let me tell you about something that happened in one of my own job interviews years ago. I was interviewing for a position at a company I was really excited about, but I was nervous because it was a step up from my previous role. Toward the end of the interview, the hiring manager asked if I had any questions. I asked, if I were to join the team, what would you most want me to accomplish in my first 6 months? That question led to a really engaging conversation about the company's goals and how I could contribute to them. Later, when I got the job, my new manager told me that question had impressed her because it showed that I was already thinking about how to be successful in the role. Now, let's talk about body language and tone of voice, because these are just as important as the words you use. Even if you say all the right things, if your body language suggests that you're not confident, it can undermine your message. The good news is that you can use your body language to actually make yourself feel more confident. Here are some simple but effective techniques. Sit up straight with both feet on the floor. Make eye contact with the interviewer when you're speaking and listening. Use your hands naturally when you talk, don't keep them completely still. And smile when it's appropriate. These might seem like small things, but they can make a huge difference in how you feel and how you're perceived. Your tone of voice is equally important. When you're nervous, your voice might become higher or quieter than usual. Try to speak from your chest rather than your throat. This will give you a stronger, more confident sound. And remember to breathe. It sounds simple, but when we're nervous, we often hold our breath or breathe shallowly, which affects our voice quality. Here's a practical exercise you can do to practice. Record yourself answering common interview questions. Listen to the recording and pay attention to your pace, your tone, and your energy level. Do you sound engaged and confident, or do you sound uncertain or rushed? This kind of self-evaluation can be incredibly valuable in helping you develop your confident interview voice. Let me share one more story with you. I worked with a student named Priya who was preparing for interviews in the healthcare field. Priya was incredibly knowledgeable and experienced, but she had a habit of ending her statements with a rising intonation, as if she were asking a question rather than making a statement. This made her sound uncertain, even when she was talking about things she knew very well. We worked on this together, and I taught her to end her statements with a falling intonation, which sounds more confident and definitive. It was a small change, but it made a big difference in how she came across in interviews. She started getting much better responses from interviewers, and she eventually landed a position at a top hospital. Now, let's talk about something that many people worry about: making mistakes during the interview. Here's the truth. Everyone makes small mistakes in job interviews, even native speakers. The key is not to let a small mistake derail your entire interview. If you mispronounce a word or can't think of the right word, don't panic. Simply correct yourself and move on, or ask for a moment to rephrase your answer. You can say something like, let me rephrase that, or what I mean to say is. These phrases show that you're thoughtful about your communication and they give you a chance to recover gracefully. Remember, the interviewer is usually more interested in your overall communication skills and your qualifications than in whether you make a small vocabulary mistake. Another strategy for sounding confident is to practice what I call positive framing. This means presenting your experiences and qualifications in the most favorable light possible while still being honest. For example, instead of saying, I don't have much experience with that software, you could say, I'm familiar with the basics of that software and I'm excited to develop my skills further. Instead of, I've never managed a team, you could say, I'm looking forward to taking on leadership responsibilities. This isn't about being dishonest. It's about presenting yourself in a confident, positive way that emphasizes your potential and your willingness to learn and grow. Let's also talk about the importance of energy and enthusiasm. Even if you're nervous, you want to come across as someone who is excited about the opportunity and engaged in the conversation. This doesn't mean you need to be over the top or fake. It means showing genuine interest in the role and the company. One way to demonstrate enthusiasm is to do your research before the interview. Learn about the company's mission, recent news, and the specific role you're applying for. When you can reference specific information about the company or ask informed questions, it shows that you're serious about the opportunity and that you've invested time in preparing. As we start to wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with some final thoughts about confidence in job interviews. Remember that confidence is not about being perfect, it's about being prepared, authentic, and positive. The interviewer wants to see the real you, not a perfect version of you that doesn't exist. Also, remember that a job interview is a two-way conversation. You're not just trying to impress the interviewer, you're also evaluating whether this job and this company are right for you. When you approach the interview with this mindset, it can help reduce some of the pressure you feel and make you sound more confident and professional. Before we finish, let me ask you a few questions to help you think about what we've discussed today. First, what's one specific story from your work or educational experience that you could tell in a job interview to demonstrate your skills? Try to think of a story that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, and that shows you in a positive light. Second, what's one area where you feel less confident in job interviews? Is it talking about your weaknesses, asking questions, or something else? Once you identify this area, you can focus on preparing and practicing specifically for that challenge. Third, what's one technique we discussed today that you'd like to try in your next job interview? Maybe it's using bridge phrases, practicing confident endings, or working on your body language. And finally, what questions do you have about job interviews that we didn't cover today? Are there specific situations or challenges you'd like to hear more about? Now, as promised, let me quickly review some of the useful vocabulary we used in today's episode. We talked about having a toolkit of phrases. That means a collection of useful expressions that you can use in different situations. We discussed bridge phrases. These are short expressions that give you time to think while you're speaking, like, that's a great question, or in my experience. We also talked about confident endings, ways to conclude your answers that reinforce your main points and sound professional. We mentioned positive framing, meaning presenting your experiences in the most favorable light while being honest. We discussed self-awareness, understanding your own strengths and areas for improvement. And we talked about being engaged, showing interest and enthusiasm during the conversation. We also mentioned trailing off when your voice gets quieter and less confident toward the end of your statements. And we discuss rising intonation versus falling intonation. Rising intonation sounds like a question, while falling intonation sounds more confident and definitive. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope you feel more prepared and confident about your next job interview. Remember, the skills we talked about today take practice to develop, so be patient with yourself and keep working on them. If you found this episode helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing it with other English learners who might benefit from these tips. Your support means the world to me and helps me create more content to help you succeed in your career and your English learning journey. Next week, we're going to continue our career series with an episode about networking and building professional relationships in English. It's another crucial skill for career success, and I'm excited to share some practical strategies with you. Until then, keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and remember, every job interview is a learning opportunity, regardless of the outcome. You've got this, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.